Our next speaker this afternoon is going to be Dr. Tobias Schlegel, who is an economic geologist and senior research scientist at the CSIRO Mineral Resources. Tobias works on iron oxide, copper gold and REE systems, iron gold skarns and genetically related ore deposits in the Gawler and Curnamona cratons, as well as the Clonaclary district. He received his doctorate of science from ETH Zurich in Switzerland before taking a consulting role, followed by a postdoctoral placement at RWTH Action in Germany. At the CSIRO, his focus is on exploration mineralogy and geochemistry applied to vectoring towards higher copper gold grades at the prospect to tenement scales. His research integrates field studies and multidisciplinary data sets to investigate the formation of ore deposits. He is especially interested in the interaction between fluids and rocks during hydrothermal alteration and mineralisation events. So I'd like you to welcome Dr. Tobias Schlegel with his talk entitled "Just How Relevant is the IOCG Model to the Curnamona Province?" Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just let's jump into it. The purpose of this study was to contribute to the understanding of the characteristics and processes required to create economic IOCG deposits and related copper deposits, as well as critical element or mineral deposits in the Curnamona Province and elsewhere. So, to increase the understanding, if the prospects in the Curnamona should be regarded as IOCG deposit or should be part of the IOCG deposit class family, and to identify mineral hosts and critical elements, mineral hosts of critical minerals with a focus on copper, cobalt, and rare earth elements. Let's jump into the regional geology a bit. Although the rocks in the Eastern Gawler Craton and the Curnamona Craton can be very different, both cratons share important aspects in their geologic history. Key events in the Curnamona Province are the Aurelian orogeny, that postdates the sedimentation of the Williama supergroup. After that, the bimodal volcanism sort of affected both areas and predates the copper mineralization, or basically the copper mineralization postdates deformation and metamorphism in the region. The study was conducted on two deposits, namely let's start like this. The study was conducted on 5 prospects from the southern Curnamona Province, 2 from the northern Curnamona Province, and then we looked at the Kalkaroo deposit and compared the findings with the Carpatina IOCG deposit. And we're going to start with looking at the mineralogy of the Kalkaroo deposit. So the host rocks, as we see, are albitites, peelites, and the important bit here is that they're showing ovoids, ellipsoids, and rhomboids, the pseudomorphs. So basically, these are part of the Portia formation, which hosts significant parts of the deposit. These ovoid and rhomboid features, they are rarely primary, or there's a rare primary mineralogy present. They're all replaced to other minerals, such as scapulae. Then carbonate ellipsoids are associated with K-felds, biotite, chloride, and host some of the chalcopyrite. The mineralogy in the ovoid and rhomboid actually matches the one in a breccia nearby, or basically a breccia in the core of the deposit, which change, and the rhomboid geology or mineralogy changes from east to west. And important bit, these are really the first features that get hydrothermally altered and also kaolinized during weathering. On the right side, you have just some features of the Portia formation with different rhomboids. Sometimes they're elongated, and we have small ones, bigger ones. They're essentially really an important piece of this Portia formation. On the right side here, it's a false color mineral map, sort of an SCM-based mineral map with albite in red, chalcopyrite, pyrite. And what becomes obvious is sort of like when these rhomboids sort of align with each other, this is where the chalcopyrite also precipitates. And we'll come to that, what that means in a second. All right, let's look at a bit at the, let's focus a bit on the mineralization of Calcaroo. And chalcopyrite is really predominantly the main, or say the hypogene copper mineral with supergene chalcocite and native copper below the weathering zone. But there is also a tiny bit of bornite in 2 samples, which sort of indicates that some of this, some of the hypogene mineralization precipitated from high fluid rock ratios. If we look at nickel copper sulfides, there is some present. So nickel copper sulfides are present, but we didn't find any cobalt bearing pyrite in the deposit, which has implications for processing in the future potentially. The important bit is we have 4 styles of mineralization: the breccia mineralization, stratabound mineralization, cross-cutting veins, and then obviously in the weathered zone or below the weathered zone. The breccia mineralization is with carbonate, quartz, chlorite, barite, anhydrite, a whole range of minor and accessory minerals, bit of magnetite, hematite in the breccia matrix. And the stratabound mineralization, as I just pointed out on the last slide, is with albite, K-feldspar, biotite, chlorite, pyrite, and it's essentially this replacement along bedding planes and along the trails of rhomboids and ovoids. Cross-cutting veins, fairly clear in a way, calcite bearing plus minus K-feldspar, biotite, and chlorite. And the vein size is sort of between 1 and 3 centimeters. So what we have here on the right is like a typical breccia at Calcaroo. It's sort of a carbonate breccia with quartz, with pyrite, obviously with chalcopyrite, which to the east turns into a quartz, also carbonate quartz breccia, carbonate chloride breccias, etc. If we look at the stratabound one, then we see lots of recrystallization, okay, of the normal albitite. So also it looks very different, these 2 sides of the alteration front. It's basically the same mineralogy, just the alteration results in grain coarsening, but that's basically it. So same mineralogy. What is interesting is, again, in the cross-cutting veins, that the carbonates are really associated with chalcopyrite, and then you see also biotite. So obviously, carbonates and hydrous minerals, okay, overprinting a more, let's say, anhydrous minerals like the albitite host rock. And then here we have an image of chalcopyrite-bearing ovoids in the albitite. Let's look at a bit of the alteration. So there is intense carbonate alteration, surrounded by some biotite and K-feldspar alteration. And the carbonate is sort of associated in the core of the, in the core of the deposit by chlorite and in outer parts by actinolite. Let's have a look at this a bit in more detail here. So we have a couple drill holes that Gabriel Berni actually looked at, and we see from the breccia style deposit hosted in the breccia, and the stratabound and the distal alteration. And when we look at sort of this area here, we see lots of carbonate, a tiny bit of iron oxides, and this is essentially where the copper sits. And then there is a change between carbonates in blue and quartz in gray, a change as you go this way from carbonate to quartz carbonate and to carbonate chloride. If we step out into this direction, okay, 406 for example, then you see that there is a broader sort of K-feldspar alteration envelope around this central zone. And important accessory minerals are apatite, anhydrite, barite, fluorite, but what we didn't really see is a lot of actinolite. For some of the people who really look for actinolite, like in the Cloncurry district, it's a bit of a bummer because there's only 1 or 2 samples with actinolite present inside the mineralized zone. Yes, so the important bit here again is the carbonate breccias increase to the west, chloride to the east, and the variations in these broad mineral assemblages are due to changing fluid rock interactions on the broad scale, but also on the very small scale when we look at the rhomboid mineralogy and their distribution. Now let's jump into the prospects of the northern Curnamona. That's basically Calabona and Volacci. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, just briefly tell you what it's there. But the copper mineralization is associated also with coarse-grained breccias and iron oxides, plus carbonite and K-feldspar alteration, so that fits sort of the standard alteration model for higher temperature alteration phases. Samples from Curnamona 1% higher carbonate contents and K-feldspar contents compared to Cal2, and pyrite dominant, pyrite is dominant over pyrite in comparison to samples from drill hole Cal002. At Wallachy, the copper mineralization is associated with magnetite-rich plus minus actinolite-rich alteration with zones with pyrrhotite and pyrite. And a bit of an odd thing, the vanadium enrichment in magnetite-rich rocks indicate sort of a magmatic origin or magmatic proximity, and it's not typically associated with IOCG deposits. All right, I have to speed up a bit. Let's look at South Curnamona prospects. Really across the stem, there runs a range of different metasedimentary rocks altered by magnetite, pyrrhotite, pyrite, etc. Chalcopyrite is associated with this sort of alteration minerals, and they overprint earlier K-feldspar along the bedding plane, and chalcopyrite occurs in veins. So at the top here, we have a sample from this, where these veins sort of, if used into these ellipsoids, you create a sometimes massive replacement, and you see the chalcopyrite. At Berksgate, we're going to jump straight to Berk to save some time. You have massive ironstones, ironstones with apatite ready to replace chloride, so you have residual chlorides being present there. Also, you have psammites, let's say dirty sandstone with a lot of magnetite, fluorite, and pyrite in them. If we look at let's focus on Berksgate real quick. So there is P-lights, and what I wanted to show here is like the data. It's basically a downhole plot, okay, with the logged lithology from Havila, then the copper grades from 1 to 3%, then our sample distribution, and here is sort of basically the mineralogy. Don't focus on the numbers too much, just what's high is red, what's blue, what's low is white. The important bit is here, as we go up, we go from albite over K-feldspar and a bit of muscovite into hydrous minerals like muscovite and chloride and carbonate where the copper sits. And this is a signature we're going to see again pretty soon. Let's go to Carpatina. Let's compare what we saw at the Curnamona and see what's the Carpatina. This is a standard representation of the rocks that you see at Carpatina. Some of them have seen it already. So you have basically altered muscovite, chloride altered granites, varied degrees of chloride breccias, a volcanic class conglomerate, sort of comes up quite a bit. A carbonate breccia, okay, with hematite, and chalcopyrite, and then a whole range of hematite breccias with bornite, chalcopyrite. Then you see it's a bit dark in here, but you see lots of chloride altered Donington's V class in variable hematite breccias or variable breccias that contain different amounts of hematite. And at the bottom, the magnetite increases quite a bit. Paragenesis a bit, so what does the alteration do to the rock? We have a lot of granite sort of replaced by chlorite and white mica. Eventually the feldspars get completely replaced by white mica under sort of sulfate-rich environments. Eventually the hematite replaces the white mica, and then it's where the bornite sort of kind of kicks in, and at depth you see a lot of carbonate replacing silicates. At the bottom, the style of mineralization, chalcopyrite replaces aluminosilicates, as evidenced here by these class shapes. Here as well, bornite replacing altered Donington's V granite class, and at depth you have sometimes a halite, which points to a really salty brine being present during mineralization. This is the same representation for Carpatina. The important bit here is that we see a really mappable deposit scale vertical zoning. It's a gradient from K-feldspar muscovite here to quartz chloride hematite. And then at this interface to the lower magnetite carbonate chloride breccia, you see the mineralization. The chalcopyrite mineralization also extends to the lower part. The important bit here is it looks like that when you have more carbonate, you have more chalcopyrite. When you have more chloride, you have less chalcopyrite. So there's an inverse correlation to that. So now this is the second last slide, or the third last slide, sorry for going over time. But it's a summary of the drill holes, basically, and illustrating where the copper sits in this line, okay, with the peaks. and then basically how the mineralogy sort of grades outward. Again, here this would be creuset. You have from anhydrous minerals over chloride and white mica to hydrous minerals. Okay, and as you go towards this side, the alteration gets bigger, the alteration zones gets bigger, and the deposit gets bigger. So the recognition and distribution of magnetite and hematite is something, but it's really what is further out in the alteration thing is that the feldspar destructive alteration and the carbonate, recognition of carbonates are key. So identifying albite, K, feldspar, and actinolite is important, but probably not so much as the other ones. And large IOCG deposits really have a large mappable zoned alteration footprint, including retrograde muscovite and iron-rich minerals, hydrous iron-rich minerals like biotite and chloride, which extend beyond the zone of copper enrichment. Summary, so the metallurgical event that created the IOCG in the Olympic province is also present in the Curnamona, evidenced by similar mineralogy. Hypogene mineralization is associated with mappable changes in alteration mineralogy. The main structure at Portia, sort of together with the Portia formation with the rhombus, exerts control on mineralization. And then, as I said, Carpatina shows a vertical zoning, and one can deduce that charcoal pyrite mineralization has studied deposits is associated with saline, acidic, fluorine-rich, carbonate-rich, as CO2-rich fluids, and that are released during the sort of circa 1850 metallurgenic event. And I want to finish with the project team because this is not a one-man show. Much of or basically all the work on Calcareau, Gabriel Berni did, and it's a collaboration between CSIRO and the GSSA. And that's basically it. Thank you.